Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Instant Hockey Channel. Today we've got a few things to discuss, including a couple of signings in Detroit, some more injury updates, a couple of trades to discuss, and what could each and every one of these NHL teams be doing with the deadline now less than a day away. We'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey Channel. I'll kick things off today with a couple of signings that happened, as they were both by Detroit. The Red Wings extend defenseman Jake Walman on a 3-year deal that has a cap hit of $3.4 million, and the Red Wings have also signed centerman Dylan Larkin to a 8-year extension that will have an average annual value of $8.7 million. Now for Walman, pretty good deal. I think maybe it's a little bit high given the fact he's more of a third pair defenseman, but Walman's done really well this year. He had 3 goals and 10 points in 51 games last year. So far has 5 goals, 10 points, 41 games this year. So he's done all right. He's a really good third pair defenseman. He's played consistent NHL minutes this year when he's been healthy. Playing in the Red Wings top 4. He's also played some time with Sider, so I think he can definitely be a good defenseman for the Red Wings. And I think he'll probably have to step up his game with guys like Philip Hronek now traded away. So I think this is a really good deal for Detroit. I think Walman was about to head to unrestricted free agency, so they're about to lose him. So just to get him signed is good. And I think for Walman, I think a $3.4 million average annual value is spectacular for him. So really good to see Walman get a really good extension. And I think Detroit liked him enough that they wanted to keep him on that blue line. And then you also have the Detroit Red Wings center, as this is the big signing, as Dylan Larkin was able to extend on an 8-year deal. And I think this is a really good signing for Detroit. I thought Larkin was probably going to get over $9 million, so to get him at only $8.7 million is pretty nice. I think they use contracts like the Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou contracts, the Roope Hintz contracts, the recently signed Bo Horvat contracts as comparables. So you get just a tad bit more on Horvat. And given the fact he's a little bit more offensive, I think that's a pretty good deal for Detroit. Given the fact they get their top line center, who's a little bit more offensive, for just $200,000 more than Horvat. So really good deal for Detroit. Larkin really likes playing with the Red Wings, and the Red Wings really like having Larkin. So it's good to see Larkin get an extension with the Red Wings. I hope that he can continue to do really well. He had 69 points in 71 games last year. So far, it's 57 points in 59 games this year. So still having a really dominant performance for Red Wings, and he's keeping them in the hunt for a playoff spot. So really good signing. I think 8 years, $8.7 million is perfect value for Larkin. I thought it would have been over $9 million. So definitely a really good addition for the Red Wings, and I expect Larkin to continue to do really well in that top 6. I think they have a good first line center now. They have a good second-line center in Andrew Kopp. So with those two now signed, they have a good 1-2 punch down the middle long term. So really good to see Walman get signed. I think Walman should definitely be a good third pair defenseman. Maybe get some top 4 minutes as well over the term of this contract. But I think that's a really good signing. And I think this is an absolutely brilliant signing for the Red Wings to get Larkin signed up long term. So really good move by the Red Wings, getting a center and defenseman signed. They have been making some moves. We know Hronek yesterday. It sounds like Bertuzzi might be moved today. So a lot of moving pieces. But to get 2 key guys locked up, one on a long-term deal, one on a shorter-term deal, is pretty good. And I think the Red Wings really like these signings. So that's all the signings I want to get to today. Now with the injury update part of the video, we'll start with the Detroit Red Wings, since we're already there, as they've had a couple of injury updates over the past little while. Robby Fabbri went down with a lower body injury about a week ago, but 2 days later he was back into game action, so he didn't miss any time. That's really good for Fabbri. Fabbri's a really good top 9 forward for the Red Wings. I think that if they were to have lost him for any period of time, they would really suffer, because Fabbri's a really good top 9 piece and he can produce really well offensively. So good to see him not miss much time and get back into game action. So it's really good to see him get back into game action really quickly and not miss too much time for the Red Wings. And I expect him to continue to do really well. Lucas Raymond, who was injured for about 2 weeks, has returned to game action after dealing with a lower body injury and has been activated off injury reserve and gone back into game action. So really good for Raymond. He's a key piece of the Red Wings top 6. Losing him for a significant period of time was never going to be good, and I don't think losing Raymond for a couple of weeks was ideal for the Red Wings either. So getting Raymond back is good. He should continue to slide into a top 6 role with a guy like Larkin and continue to play good, consistent top 6 minutes, be a good point producer for the Red Wings. So good to see him get back off of injury reserve. It was not really good with the Red Wings for him missing so much time. Then you have Jordan Oesterle, who's a good 6th, 7th defenseman for the Red Wings. He's an undisclosed injury, going to be out for an unknown period of time, and has since been placed in injury reserve. So he's at least going to miss the next week, which is definitely not good news for the Red Wings. But hopefully it's not too much longer than that. I know the unknown period of time means that we really don't know when he's going to be back, but I do expect him to be back at some point, possibly in the next couple of weeks. So hopefully Oesterle isn't out too long, this undisclosed injury isn't too significant, and hopefully he can get back in game action and continue to help the Red Wings playoff push. And finally here with Michael Rasmussen. Rasmussen suffered a lower body injury and is going to be out for an indefinite period of time. It sounds like Rasmussen is going to be out for a huge amount of time. So hopefully he's not lost for too long, but it's really sad to see Rasmussen go down. He's a really good middle six winger for the Detroit Red Wings, and he's done actually quite well this year. So hopefully Rasmussen's only out for like a week or two, and it's not overly significant. But yeah, not a really good situation for the Detroit Red Wings to be in with Michael Rasmussen also going down. So hopefully Rasmussen gets back in the near future, and Oesterle can recover from his undisclosed injury quickly to get back into game action. But getting Raymond and getting Fabry back into the lineup is really good, and hopefully those two can continue to help the Red Wings in their push for a playoff spot. Next, over with the Nashville Predators. Now, the Preds have had a couple of injury updates. After being out with an injury for just over a month, Alex Carrier has returned from his upper body injury and has gone back into game action. Now, we know that the Predators have recently dealt Mattias Ekholm. There's a lot of talk they could deal Dante Fabro. And with those guys currently leaving, they're going to need a couple of good young defensemen who can come in and step in, have a good role with Predators, and carry those examples. Carrier had a really great rookie season last year, has fallen off this year, but I still think Carrier is a good top 4 defenseman, so to get him back into game action is really good. And I hope Carrier can continue to be a really good defenseman for the Predators, and hopefully he can continue to play just like he did last year and find that game that he had last year. Then with Juuso Parssinen, Parsons missed the last couple of games due to a upper body injury, and he's going to be out for an unknown period of time. So not good that Parssinen is going to be out for a while. He's a rookie. He's actually done quite well this year for the Predators after being called up, so hopefully he's not out too long. I know it's an unknown period of time, which makes it a little bit more difficult to predict when he'll be back, but hopefully it's not too long of an injury, and he can get back in the very near future. I think Parsonson's a really, really good young forward for the Preds, and he should continue to do well. So hopefully Parsonson's not out too long. He can get back and be reinserted in that top 9 for Nashville. And lastly, with Ryan Johansen, he suffered a leg injury that will keep him out 3 months. Now, with the Preds not trending towards being a playoff team, this is probably a season-ending injury for Johansen. So not good for Johansen. He's got a long-term, very expensive contract, and after last year's pretty good season, they were hoping that he could get somewhat similar production this year. Obviously, he hasn't. He hasn't really done great this year, so hopefully he can recover. He can get back into game action in the new season, and he can play quite well. But just bad news for Johansen. He's a pretty big piece of that top 6. But really, good news for Nashville to get Carrier back and into game action, but awful news to see Parssinen and Johansen both go down with injuries. And lastly here with the Florida Panthers, they've had a couple of injuries. As first, Anthony Duclair was able to be activated off of IR after suffering an Achilles injury before the season began, and he has since played in his first game of the season. Now Duclair's a really good speedy winger. The Panthers really like using his services. He's a really good top 6 forward for them, and I would expect them to continue to do really well. Now, getting Duclair back is a huge good move by the Florida Panthers, getting another good top 6 winger into their lineup, and I expect him to continue to do well. He might have a little bit of rust, given the fact he's coming off a Achilles injury that kept him out for the first 4 months of the season. So hopefully he does well, and he can continue to be a really good speedy winger, but at least good news to get Duclair finally off injury reserve. Due to having to activate him, they placed Giovanni Smith on long-term injury reserve, and he's going to be out for an unknown period of time due to a face injury. So not good for Smith. We now know he's going to be missing at least 10 games or 24 days due to the fact he was placed on long-term injury reserve. So hopefully it's not too long and Smith can get back in the near future. Ever since being acquired by Florida in season, he's been a really good fourth-line forward for the Panthers. So hopefully he can get back in the near future and get back into game action, but it's going to be interesting to see when he gets back. Eric Stahl suffered an undisclosed injury, but just a couple days later he was back into game action. So it's good news for Stahl. We know he's recently coming off a concussion, so good news for Stahl to get back into game action, not have too much of an injury trouble. He's a really good fourth line center, so I expect him to continue to go back and play in that role and continue to be a really good leader on that team. And then Alexander Barkov has missed the last few days, and he's out right now with an undisclosed injury in his day-to-day. So not really good news for Barkov. Barkov's a really good top-line center for the Panthers, one of their better offensive producers. To lose him for any period of time is not great, so hopefully he can return in the near future, get back into game action, but just really bad to lose him for a little bit. So they get Anthony Duclair and Eric Stahl back from injuries to get them back into the lineup, but they do wind up putting Giovanni Smith in long-term injury reserve due to an injury, and they currently have Barkov out. So hopefully Barkov and Smith can return in the near future, but really big win to see Duclair and Stahl get back into game action. Next, over with a couple of trades that have happened. These were a couple of trades that never got to yesterday I want to discuss. First, Lars Eller. Now, Eller was dealt to the Colorado Avalanche, as well as 31% of his contract being retained by the Capitals, which will bring Eller's cap hit from a $3.5 million cap hit to a $2.415 million cap hit. He was sent to the Colorado Avalanche in exchange for a 2025 second-round pick. So pretty good deal for both sides. The Avalanche don't have much draft capital to work with. They've already traded most of it. So a second-round pick in the 2025 draft isn't too significant for them right now, given the fact they're still trying to win the Cup and they're trying to repeat this year. So not too bad for Colorado. They get Eller in return, who I think will be a really good third-line center for the Avalanche. I know they've been looking for second-line centers, but most of the centers group is now gone, so maybe this is all they do for the deadline. It's quite possible, but getting a third-line center is not too bad. Eller's had consistent 30-point seasons in the past with the Capitals. Had 31 points in 72 games last year. This year hasn't done overly great, having 7 goals and 16 points in 60 games. So it looks like it's possible he doesn't even hit the 20-point mark, but he's going to the Avalanche team who's really offensive, and he should be able to fit in really well. So I expect Eller to be a third-line center with maybe a couple of guys like a Nieto or Cogliano on his line. Once Landeskog gets back, maybe like a JT Compher as well. So definitely a really good addition for the Avalanche. I think Eller will be a spectacular fit with the Avalanche. Should be a really good third-line center, and I don't expect him to retain him past this offseason, so he's probably just going to be a rental for the Avs, but really good to see them get another center to help them with their forward group, and I expect Eller to continue to do really well. As for the Capitals, not too much of a surprise that they were able to move Eller. Moved a lot of pending unrestricted free agents, including guys like Marcus Johansen, Eric Gostisbehere, now Lars Eller. They also moved to Orlov and Hathaway earlier, so they're just moving off all of their pending unrestricted free agents for picks. So good moves by the Capitals. I was surprised that Eller was able to grab a second-round pick for the Capitals. I thought a third or fourth-round pick probably was the more likely scenario, but they're able to get a second-round pick. So good for the Capitals. I think getting the second-round pick definitely helps them have more draft capital and should be able to help them continue to compete in the future if they were to trade these picks later on for good players. But for now, this helps Colorado, and I think Eller should be a fantastic fit in Colorado. So in my opinion, the Caps won this deal because I think Eller is not really worth a second-round pick. He's a good player, don't get me wrong. I think the Colorado Avalanche reached a little bit here to get Eller and move the second-round pick. So good move by the Caps and the Avs. I would like to know what you think about this deal. I would like you to let me know what you think down in the comments. As for the other trade, the Arizona Coyotes moved Shane Gostisbehere to the Carolina Hurricanes in exchange for a 2026 third-rounder. So really good move. I think this is a really good steal for Carolina. I thought Gostisbehere would have gone for a little bit more. Gostisbehere's been a really good offensive producer over the past couple of seasons with Arizona. Had 51 points in 82 games last year. Has had a little bit of injury trouble this year, but so far has 31 points in 52 games this year. So he's done pretty good, and I expect him to probably be a good third-pair defenseman for the Carolina Hurricanes for their playoff run. I expect him to continue to play consistent third-pair minutes for the Canes, probably behind guys like Shea and Burns, and I expect him to continue to produce well. He should probably be able to quarterback the second power play unit, and I expect him to continue to do really well. The Arizona Coyotes didn't retain any salary on Gostisbehere, so he goes to Carolina at the full $4.5 million cap hit, and I expect him to continue to do really well. I think Gostisbehere in Carolina is a really great addition. For Arizona, they were never going to re-sign Gostisbehere, so moving him for picks right now is the really good move. I would expect Arizona to continue to do well, but even though the third-round pick in 2026 is underwhelming, you got to remember that Arizona was given a second-round pick, and if I'm correct, another pick, to take his contract on a couple of years ago by the Philadelphia Flyers for future consideration. So if you look at this, they were to take on and then move Gostisbehere. They got a second-round pick, a third-round pick, and another draft selection to make the Gostisbehere trades work. So I think this is a really good piece of move by Arizona to get assets to take him on and then move him for assets. So really good. I think the third round pick in 26 should definitely help them when they're competing for a playoff spot and when they're trying to make the playoffs. And I think this is a really good deal for both sides. I would say Carolina probably does win the deal in my opinion, just given the fact that they were able to get Gostisbehere for only a third round pick. But a really good move for both of them. Carolina gets a good third pair of defensemen, who's a good offensive defenseman, should help on the power play, and should round out that top six really well. As for the Arizona Coyotes, they move a pending UFA who they're never going to resign, and they also get a third round pick in return. So good move for both sides, and I can't wait to see what these teams do next. Those are the only two trades I'm going to discuss. Now over to the trade rumor part of the video. Now I'm just going to go through a couple of teams here and what they could be doing over the next 24 hours before the trade deadline. Starting with the Eastern Conference, starting with the Atlantic Division, you got Boston. Now, I'm hearing rumblings today that it sounds like Boston's going to acquire Tyler Bertuzzi today, so if they do wind up doing that, I would not expect much of anything left for the Boston Bruins. They have little to no cap space, so unless they were to move a guy like Mike Riley and free up some more cap space, if they do end up acquiring Bertuzzi, I'll expect that to be the only move they do before the deadline. They've already acquired Orlov and Hathaway. They've made a few other small moves, so I'll expect Boston to probably be quiet over the next 24 hours. Buffalo, they were able to move Portillo a little while ago. They got Riley Stillman. I still expect them to be small buyers, and I could see them go after like a short-term third-line center to help them with their faceoffs. Maybe they add in another depth position, but I could see Buffalo be a little bit of a busy team over the next few hours. You got Detroit. I could see them try and do something. We know that it sounds like they're moving Bertuzzi. We know they moved Ronick. There's some speculation a little while ago on Insider Trading on TSN that the Red Wings are also willing to deal Philip Zadina, who is a good young player. So it sounds like the return for Bertuzzi is a first-round pick. So if they get a first-round pick there, they already have the Islanders' first-round pick in the Ronick deal. They could have a lot of assets, and I'm wondering if they could maybe try and pull off a deal to improve this team for now and in the future. So I think while Detroit is selling off pieces, and they could still sell off more with a guy like Zadina or Verana, watch out for them, as they could be a good team to possibly add before the deadline, in my opinion. You got Florida. They haven't done much of anything. I think it's possible they stand pat, but I also think that with the way they are in the playoff race, it's quite possible we see them make a move. For a while now, we've heard that the Panthers could move one of Bennett, Reinhart, or Duclair to free up some cap space for now and in the offseason. So I think it's possible we see one of them being moved. I think the more likely ones are Reinhart and Duclair, but definitely going to be interesting to see. They also have a good pending free agent in Gudas, who we have said could be moved for the right price. So I definitely like to see what Florida does. I expect them to be a busy team over the next 24 hours. You got Montreal. They've been a little bit quiet. There's been some talk about Joel Edmondson. I wonder if he gets dealt. I think that's a name we have to look out for. Same thing with guys like Mike Hoffman and Jonathan Drouin, two really good middle six wingers who I think could be dealt for the right price. So keep an eye out for the Canadiens to possibly continue to be sellers and move a couple more pieces before the deadline. Ottawa, they made their big splash. They acquired Jacob Chychrun. I think it's possible, but not likely, they move Cam Talbot. I think it's also a possibility they move a guy like Austin Watson. So I think they could still move a couple pending unrestricted free agents, but definitely not guaranteed. And I think with this Chychrun deal, they may just wind up standing pat before the deadline. You got the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs have done a lot. There's rumblings that they could possibly do maybe one or two more deals. If they were, expect a Kerfoot or Holt to be moved and someone else to come in. We know they have a lot of defensemen. So in my opinion, it will probably most likely be a Holt being traded out and someone else coming in. So expect that for the Maple Leafs. The Bolts did free up some cap space in both the Jeannot deal and the Nemesnikov deal. So with those two deals, they have a little bit more cap space. I could see them go after like a depth player, whether it be a forward or a defenseman, but I could see them go after someone small before the deadline. And that's all for the Atlantic. For the Metro, Carolina's done some good adding guys like Gostisbehere and Puljujarvi, and with their cap space, they're probably not going to do much more, but I could still see them add like maybe like a depth forward before the deadline, so keep an eye on the Hurricanes. Jackets, I would say, is pretty much stand pat. They've moved all of their big pending unrestricted free agents, and they're probably not going to move much more, so I expect Columbus to be quite quiet over the next day. You got Jersey. They made their big splash acquiring Meyer. They still have a lot of cap space, especially given the fact Meyer's contract was retained, 50%. So I could see Jersey be a big player for over the next 24 hours. Maybe not to the extent of a Timo Meyer, but I could see them maybe go after like a depth forward or a third pair of defensemen, something like that to help them. So definitely watch out for the Devils. The Islanders, we know they keep on trying to go for it. They got Horvat. I wonder if they maybe go after a middle six guy. I know they got Engvall, but I could definitely see them be a team who possibly tries to improve their team a little bit. I know that there was some talk about Pajot being moved, but with him being injured and the Islanders still in a playoff race, I don't expect him to be moved. So possibly look for the Islanders to make some sort of another addition. Rangers pretty much tapped out cap-wise, and I don't expect them to make much more of anything. So I'll expect them to stand pat over the next 24 hours. They've made a really lethal team. I think they're happy with that. So I'll expect them to continue to do nothing. Flyers going to be a really interesting team to watch, in my opinion. They have JVR still on the block. There's a lot of speculation that he'll be traded. And there's been some recent speculation that guys like Provorov and Hayes are drawing interest. So it'd be really interesting to see what those teams do. You've got the Pittsburgh Penguins. They clear a lot of cap space. They use the cap space to go get Mikael Granlund. There's some talk that they could still maybe look to add something else. Maybe they try and acquire something off the forward group and move something off the defense group, given the fact they have a really deep defense. So watch out for Pittsburgh to try and maneuver around the cap to try and improve this team even more. The Capitals are still looking at selling some pending unrestricted free agents. They have a guy like Connor Sherry and Trevor Van Riemsdyk who would probably draw some interest. So keep an eye on the Capitals. They could be a team to watch out for a couple more moves before the deadline. Now that's all for the East. Let's go to the West. Start with the Central. Arizona is still close to the cap, so not exactly sure what moves they would do, but expect Nick Bjugstad to be dealt. Pending unrestricted free agent, really good bottom six winger, so expect him to be dealt. Same thing with Nick Ritchie. I wonder about Troy Stetcher, who are all really good pending unrestricted free agents. There's also some talk about like a Nick Schmaltz or a Lawson Krause. Unless they take on some money, I really think that's very unlikely, but there's a possibility that one of Schmaltz or Krause could be dealt before the deadline. So Arizona's going to be a really interesting team to watch. For the Blackhawks, they've made most of their moves, trading guys like Kane, McCabe, Lafferty. There's still two guys there who signed one-year deals in the offseason to try and improve their value and be traded at the deadline. That's Domi and Athanasiou. I think of all the players for the Chicago Blackhawks, I could easily see those two being dealt before the deadline. So expect possible Domi and Athanasiou moves over the next 24 hours. At least in my opinion, I think both those guys will be moved. If you look at Colorado, they added Eller, they added Nieto, they added Jack Johnson. Depending on what the Landeskog situation is, really will depend on what they do. If Landeskog and or Eric Johnson are out until the playoffs, they could possibly put them on long-term injury reserve and go out and acquire another forward. But for now, I think that they're probably done. So unless those two are definitely going to miss the rest of the season, I definitely would think that Colorado's probably done now with the Eller deal. Dallas, interesting team to watch. They added Dodonov a little while ago. I could see Dallas be a team looking to add a significant top 9 forward. So look out for the Stars to possibly try and make a move, especially with all these other teams in the West making moves. You got Minnesota. They added Nyquist and Johansen. I'm not exactly sure if they would make any more moves, but there's been a lot of talk about possibly dealing Jordan Greenway. He makes $3 million. So if they can deal Greenway, maybe they bring in another forward who makes similar sort of a cap hit. So that'd be really interesting to see for the Wild. So the Wild are definitely going to be an interesting team over the next little while. You got the Nashville Predators. Already started to sell off a ton of players. Granlund, Jeannot, Ekholm. There's already sold off a lot of pieces. Niederreiter as well. So I could see him sell more. I'm looking at a guy like Yakov Trenin, who's a good player who's cost controlled for the next year. You got Dante Fabro, who there's been a lot of talk that he could be moved. So I'd definitely be watching the Nashville Predators to see what else they could sell. St. Louis Blues. They still have a couple of good top 4 defensemen, and there's a lot of talk that a guy like Colin Parayko could be moved. It's hard to make happen before the deadline due to his no trade clause, but Parayko and the Blues are definitely an interesting team to see. There's also been some talk that they could go after someone with all their newfound draft capital, so it'd be interesting to see, but I think St. Louis could make a trade or two before the deadline. For the Jets, it sounds like they could be looking for another top 4 defenseman. I could still see him look for another top 9 forward, so the Jets are going to be an interesting team to see before the deadline. I think that the Jets could definitely use another defenseman and definitely another scoring forward. So going to be interesting to see for the Winnipeg Jets, but I would expect them to possibly look to add before the deadline. And then in the Pacific, Ducks still have a lot of players out there who they haven't traded yet. Ducks have been one of the more quiet teams. Klingberg, Kuliakov, Boylo, Shankirk on the defense, and some guys like Comtois or Henrique on the forward side could all be dealt before the deadline. I expect them to probably have a really busy next 24 hours and possibly look to deal a couple of players. You got the Calgary Flames, another team who's really been quiet over the past little while. Not really doing much. They're a fringe playoff team. Currently, I think it was 4 or 6 points out of the playoff spot right now. So they're not looking like they're going to make the playoffs. So it is possible they wind up looking to try and maybe sell a piece or two. But it's also possible to try and get a piece or two to get back into the playoff race. So it's going to be really interesting to see. But I think Calgary's going to be a really dark horse team to make a couple of moves before the deadline. You look at Edmonton. They made their big move. They acquired Ekholm. They lost Puljujärvi to Carolina. So they made a few moves. There's some talk that they could make one more move to try and acquire a bomb six forward, like a Nick Bjugstad, for example. So I would expect Edmonton to make maybe one more move, but then they'd be done for that. LA acquired Korpisalo and Gavrikov. I could see them move maybe a defenseman out. I mean, they have a really stacked blue line, and guys like a Sean Walker or a Matt Roy are not going to probably play consistent minutes. So I could see one of those two be dealt to a team who really needs a defenseman. So definitely keep an eye on the LA Kings. There's a possibility they could move a defenseman. In San Jose, we know they're trying to move even more players. They moved Maya already this year. They moved Nieto. I'm looking at a guy like Nick Bonino, Kevin Labanc, James Reimer. Bonino and Reimer are pending unrestricted free agents. Labanc has one more year left. So I think all three of these guys could be dealt before the deadline. So keep an eye on the San Jose Sharks. Kraken, another quiet team so far. They're sort of on the fringe of being in the playoffs or making the playoffs. So I would expect them to possibly make both buyer and seller moves. There's a lot of talk they could move Carson Seuss. I think that's a very likely possibility. There's also some talk that they could try and upgrade that defensive core and the forward group. So I think Seattle, as well as Anaheim and Calgary, are going to be really interesting teams to watch out over the next 24 hours. And then for the Canucks, there's a lot of talk that Brock Besser or JT Miller could be moved, especially after the Roenick trade where they're over the cap for next year. So I would expect them to move at least one big contract before the deadline. And for Vegas, they've done a really good job. They've added Teddy Bluger. They've added Ivan Barbashev on the forward group. I think they might be done adding forwards. I could see him go after a goaltender to help them while Logan Thompson's still injured. So maybe a Cam Talbot or a Jonathan Quick from Columbus. Definitely, I think, possibilities, but if Vegas were to do anything now, I would expect it to be adding a third-string goaltender to help them while Thompson's out. So definitely going to be interesting to see. I would like to know what you think. Which teams do you think will be active over the next 24 hours before a deadline? And what moves do you think we could see before a deadline? I would like to know your opinion down in the comments. So that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I also do a blog, which I will leave a link to in the description below. Remember to check out the End-to-End Hockey Trade Deadline live blog. We'll get to that tomorrow, as tomorrow is deadline day. Not exactly sure how many trades there will be because there's a lot of moves going on right now. But we'll see what happens tomorrow as the trade season will be winding to a close. So definitely check out the deadline blog. I'll leave a link to that in the description below as well. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.